I held a unique duty while I was in Iraq. I was assigned to the Human Intelligence and Force Protection Team. I worked with 70 Iraqi men all day, every day. I had only very brief interactions with other soldiers. Through my mission, I became deeply embedded in the lives of the Iraqi people with whom I worked, which forced me to see some of the results of our actions there. The NGO Coordination Committee for Iraq reports that the majority of Iraqis live with less than 6 hours of electricity a day. This has led to water purification plants and sewage treatment systems being rendered inoperable since 2003, which has further led to water contamination problems and shortages. 1 in 4 Iraqis do not have access to safe drinking water as of 2010. I saw this quite a bit. There was a small village outside the base that I lived on. The village had maybe a couple of small generators that powered water pumps and lights. The generators would often break down. I didn't see any real help going from our base to this village. You could see it. I mean, it was really close. It was right outside our gate. I got permission to give the Iraqis several cases of drinking water during a particular heat wave when the generators were broken. We had so much of it, I was really surprised to know that the base hadn't sent pallets of it over there already. I later tried to take this effort a step further and help fix the generators. Unfortunately, the ING gate officer became quite corrupt. He took all of the supplies for himself. He would then sell them at outrageous markup prices that the villagers could never afford. It's estimated that 80% of discharged sewage is untreated due to the frequent power outages. This has particular severe consequences for health and rapidly spreading disease. Hospitals in these areas are now reporting an alarming increase in babies born with heart disease and major deformities. Leukemia and cancer rates have skyrocketed in major cities due to exposure to white phosphorus and depleted uranium weapons. 14,000 of Iraq's 34,000 physicians have left since the invasion. The civilians that I encountered used to beg to be treated at our base hospital. But we could only bring the civilians who we wounded into there. And speaking of healthcare and hospitals, I've got to point out that the smallest and most trivial things became life-saving materials. One day, one of the men I worked with pulled me aside. He was very emotional, and I was able to gather that his mother was very sick with some sort of heart condition. The hospitals were destroyed and abandoned. There were no doctors or medicine around. He said that his mother needed a very special medication to save her life. I told him that I didn't have access to the pharmacy and I probably wouldn't be able to help. He handed me a small scroll of paper, about an inch high. And I was really surprised when I unrolled it to see the word aspirin written in English letters. It was hard for me to put all this together at the time, so I asked him if he was sure about it, and I took the tiny scroll and went to the small PX that we had. There were 3 large dusty bottles of aspirin sitting on the shelf for $1.25 each. So I took them, and I bought them. And the next day, I unrolled the scroll of paper, and I had the bottle up like this, and I put the scroll of paper right next to the label so that he knew it was the same thing. And he cried, and he took everything out of his pockets, and everything off of him, and everything that he had in his possession. He put it down for me, except for his clothing, and it just wanted me to have it. And I, at this time, I didn't know what was customary, and I just told him, I don't need this, take your stuff. it wasn't much. The medicine wasn't much. But it was much. It was a lot for them. So much so that from that day on, the mothers of that village showered me with food and gifts from their home every day, thanking me. All of this over some aspirin. 1 in 5 Iraqis between the age of 10 and 49 cannot read a simple statement related to daily life. Iraq reported a record low illiteracy rate in the Middle East in the 1980s. But that's jumped up to at least 20% in 2010. And now, after 8 years of war, thousands of schools need rehabilitation, and those schools need teachers. Of the 70 Iraqis that I saw daily, about a handful of them could read. Most of them were in their teens. But I particularly remember Ashraf. He was so smart. And when I say smart, I don't mean that he could just read and write. He was highly intelligent in science and math. And due to the devastation of the invasion, Ashraf was forced to work for a few dollars a day, laboring on the base, changing tires, so his family could eat. Had he been living here, he could have been an engineer or a doctor, maybe an economist. So yes, there's this huge education and literacy problem in Iraq, but there seems to be a much bigger problem if those who are literate and educated are fighting for the scraps that everyone else is fighting for. That doesn't make sense to me. More than half of Iraq's widows lost their husbands after the 2003 invasion. Social welfare support from the government to widows, divorcees, and other vulnerable groups has recently been halted due to lack of funds. This is the human impact of the Iraq War. MIT recently reported that in the year 2000, 17% of the Iraqi people lived in slum conditions. But in 2011, 50% of the Iraqi people lived in slum conditions. 50%. The people living in these conditions increased by 33%, while we were there, liberating and rebuilding Iraq. That doesn't make sense to me. Of the 30 million people in Iraq, 7 million of them live below the poverty line. I mentioned earlier that there are 4.5 million orphans in Iraq. 600,000 of them are living, or rather dying, on the streets. And what about the effects that cannot be quantified? What about the corruption, lack of sustainability, lack of faith in the American liberators? What about the fear? The fear of sending their children to school. The fear of just going to work. The fear of walking down their neighborhoods, their neighborhood streets. In her report called An Iraqi Woman Regards the Human Cost of the War in Iraq, Huda Ahmed discusses how the devastation of the essential services and widespread unemployment led many desperate Iraqis to join the armed groups or organized crime gangs. The same gangs that strengthen the government corruption. She also states that the Iraqis never thought they would have to pay so much for seeking democracy and freedom, especially if they were led by the most powerful country. This is the human impact of the Iraq War. Now, for some, if not most of you here tonight, I haven't revealed much that you don't already know. Nor have I provoked any emotions about the cost of war that you don't already feel. But how do we share the truth with others? How do we ignite a fire in otherwise complacent people to not only repair the damage that we've caused, what damage we can repair, but to ensure that we don't see another 4,804 casualties, 32,223 wounded, 400,000 civilians killed, thousands of suicides and homeless vets, millions of people without clean water, electricity, education, and opportunity. How do we ensure that we don't see this in a future preemptive war? Well, herein lies another side of the human impact of the war. The side where people like you and me have seen the lives of our friends, neighbors, family members, countless civilians taken or destroyed. We've seen the damage to societies, economies, and democracy. I look forward to seeing these tragedies ignite us to come together, to stand up and demand that our veterans receive proper health care and therapy, demand that the strings of the corporate puppeteers be severed, demand that our defense budget be put back into repairing the damage that we've done and to build sustainable, efficient, and peaceful communities. I look forward to the humans impacted by this devastating war to, in turn, impact what we as a nation do moving forward. We can't bring back our fallen comrades, nor can we revive those we took along the way. But together, we can be heard, we can pick up the pieces, we can restore our good name, we can repair our vets, we can reject the blood-ridden path that has led us here. We no longer have to be the human impact of the war. We can be the human impact on these wars and on all wars. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucky.